What's good, my brothers? It's your boy Sal Speaks back with another video again. Shout out to everyone in the Semen Retention Network. Shout out to all the brothers out there who are locked in. I hope you've all been achieving your dreams. Shout out to all the brothers out there. I hope you've all been successful and you've all been successfully retaining. Back with another video today, my brothers. Please make sure you like and subscribe and comment down below if you're enjoying the content. My brothers, the title of today's video is called People Will Doubt You When You're on Semen Retention. People will doubt you. People will try to portray their fears, their insecurities onto you. It's important to rise up against this, my brothers. Most people are only looking at you through their own failures. You need to be able to rise above this. Your self-belief must be so high that people will begin to follow you. It's important, my brothers. This is a lonely journey. I'm sure most of you brothers have already accepted that. It's an extremely lonely journey. You're alone with your thoughts and your sorrows, going through all kinds of mental experiences. And most people don't really understand this. So when you're on this practice, you have to understand. Most people will doubt you when you're in semen retention, especially when you're in semen retention. And the reason why I believe this is because when you're in semen retention, you're going through a process of self-enlightenment. You're going through a process of self-transformation. You're growing, guys. You're growing much faster than the people around you. And when the people around you see someone next to them growing, they feel despicable. They feel inferior. So it's important, my brothers, you always understand that on this journey, you will have people who will hold you back. People who will doubt you. And I'd just like to continue with this story. And the story was of a great statesman named John F. Kennedy. Now, we all remember him as one of the greatest presidents alive. However, his reality was not this way. He was actually brought up as a very frail, a very weak child, constantly transported from hospital to hospital. People doubted him. They saw him as really weak looking, really frail looking. And even in school, children would often comment on his looks. He would look sickly, he would look pale, he would look emaciated, he would look tired. He just looked like death. And kids would always tease him for this. And whenever they'd mention his facial features to him, John F. Kennedy would be frightened. He'd be completely frightened. He would be so scared to do anything because he had this fear of people commenting on how he looked because of his sicknesses when he was young. And John F. Kennedy had to go through several cases of transformation because many times throughout his life, people doubted him. So when he was seen as that weak, frail individual, he enlisted in the Navy. When he enlisted in the Navy, he ended up becoming a lieutenant and fighting in the Second World War. And during the time when he was fighting in the Second World War, he was leading a ship. And in this ship, it was actually hit by a Japanese torpedo, in fact, and the ship was basically split in half. And John F. Kennedy during that time was actually successful in evacuating all his men to safety. He actually ended up receiving a Medal of Honor for this, and it was through this act of bravery that people began to see him in a different light. He was able to step up and you know, push through all those doubts. When people thought he'd look sick and, you know, measly, he thought, no, I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna transform this. And he ended up receiving a Medal of Honor for that. And later on throughout his life, he ended up transitioning to become a senator. And during his time as a senator, he was a young, you know, he was a young Catholic senator, you know, very ambitious. His other colleagues would often see him as really, really weak, really ambitious. He seemed like they viewed him almost like as if he was a lightweight, you know. And during his time in his office, as a senator, he actually dropped another book, a Pulitzer Prize winning book, talking about literally speaking about what previous politicians actually went through in moments of defiance, such as, you know, certain politicians who were in the Democratic Party during the time, who were against slavery, although their own party was pro-slavery. So it talks about all the times that politicians before actually did things that were morally correct, but during the time they faced a lot of backlash for this. And this book alone literally propelled him to levels of notoriety, and he ended up becoming literally one of the greatest senators because of this book. And he ended up writing about those senators that literally led during defying moments, and he ended up becoming one of those senators himself. So in a sense, it was almost like as if it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that shows that when people doubted him, he had this self-belief to rise, and that created a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when he rose, people began to respect him and admire him and see him as that man for who he was. And then later on, when he ended up running for presidency, people doubted him again. They saw him as just this young Catholic liberal senator. You know, he's a lightweight. He's not ready for it. And again, during this time, he had to transform his image. He transformed his image, and he ended up showing the people that he would be able to take people out of that traumatic, depressing Eisenhower era, and he would be the leader to take people into the next generation. You know, he would be the person to, you know, oversee, you know, to get man on the moon, to oversee the greatest inventions, and oversee, you know, literally the rise of one of the greatest empires in history, which is the American Empire. And he was at the heart of that. So essentially, he transformed his image to become like that prophet-like figure where people will follow him. And, you know, we in fact, we all remember him through his speeches regarding getting man on the moon. And it was through this he transformed himself constantly. And when people doubted him, he transformed his image, he changed his image, and he pushed further and further and further.